This is an Irreverent podcast. Check out irreverent.fm for shows from all our friends. Hey everyone, welcome back to the show. I've got a wide-ranging interview with Rabbi Danya Ruttenberg to share with you today. It's been a few years since I spoke with her, and the geopolitical landscape has changed considerably in that time. In the first half of the conversation, we talk about the ongoing war and genocide in Gaza, and broadly about how Jewish communities in the U.S. have responded. We also discuss the revelations of the Epstein Files and how to ensure that antisemitism doesn't creep into our reactions to these stories coming to light. Further, we also talk about how certain terms and language may no longer be adequate or accurate, and the challenges of speaking on these hot-button issues at all, online or elsewhere. In the second half, we talk about Rabbi Danya's work at her online publication, Life as a Sacred Text, the concept of moral injury, and how she works with people of differing beliefs throughout her work. Rabbi Danya speaks with compassion, care, nuance, and solidarity, and I hope that this conversation is received in that same spirit. As always, you can support this show by subscribing across social media and YouTube, and most directly by purchasing my book or a paid subscription at blakechastain.com. I donate 25% of net revenue annually. All right, let's get into it. My guest today is Rabbi Danya Ruttenberg, author of the book On Repentance and Repair and the online publication Life as a Sacred Text. We last spoke in 2022. Rabbi Ruttenberg, welcome back to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for coming on. I'm really glad to report that since we last talked, everything is going swimmingly. Everything's great across the world. Everyone's at peace and living in harmony. Nothing to talk about, really.
Yes.
But actually, so much has happened. When we spoke, we were living in the brief Biden era, and now we've got to contend with multiple wars: the war in Palestine and in Gaza, the war in Iran. I wanted to talk and hear from you a little bit. It's been a few years. Let's talk about Gaza and Palestine and Israel and just address that right at the top. And my audience is mostly either Christian or formerly Christian. So we're outsiders by and large, to the Jewish experience. So what, over the last few years, what has and I know that Judaism is not a monolith, but throughout the various Jewish communities, what has the American Jewish relationship been in relation to these events and what's happened in Gaza, and more particularly to speak to your own experience and how you've responded to it?
Oh, God. I mean, the genocide, and I will speak plainly, has been... I mean, there aren't words. Watching this happen, I'm a member of Rabbis for Ceasefire. I have been, by and large, using my voice and my platform more independently. They've been doing incredible work. There are a lot of parts of my community that have, from the beginning, been, including myself, been very clear that October 7th was an atrocity. It was a massacre. It was, absolutely a war crime. And there was no justification for it. And that, genocide, that it does not justify genocide on the other side. And I spoke to a beloved Israeli friend on October 7th who said, and now thousands and thousands of Palestinian children are going to be massacred, and they're not going to get Hamas. I mean, it was just like we all knew this is we've been seeing this pattern for decades. And so standing by and having to watch this and know that Bibi Netanyahu was doing this to keep his corrupt ass, his indicted corrupt ass, out of jail, because that's what it was. This is, if you've been paying attention to Israeli politics, you'd know that he was already in the middle of a judicial coup that was deeply unpopular, in the months leading up to October 7th, because he was trying to keep his indicted corrupt ass out of jail.
Okay.
And a whole other people is paying for it. It's for people for whom never again was supposed to be our entire way of being, for whom choose life is supposed to be our entire way of being. Like there isn't language, really. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's been very, 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 like, the moral injury of watching many American Jewish organizations feel dehumanize Palestinians and feel like they have to rally in favor of, wave the flags and all of that has been also people that I and many of my other friends, we have loved and trusted personally. Like, it's all like there's been a very, and then also having many of our other comrades and people on the left jump into hardcore anti-Semitism and completely conflate Jews and Israelis, and not understand that there are many Israelis that have been working to fight the occupation for decades, and right, like, and Israelis whose family story is we didn't have anywhere else to go, and that doesn't mean that we're in favor of massacring anyone and stealing their land, and like, or our family has been on this land for millennia, or like the story. There's so many layers and so much complexity here that gets lost on social media when people just want to scream and post flags. And it's like, what if the sanctity of every human being like, what if children and futures and everybody gets to flourish,
Yeah.
and we figure this out? What if 14 million people sharing this space and justice in future, and understanding and respecting the unbelievable power differential that has been in, like, it's not like we're going to pretend power is flat. Oh, we don't see color. Oh, we don't see occupation. Right? I'm not, like, none of that bullshit. But like,
Yeah, but
like throw the Jews into the sea is also not the solution here, people. Right?
right. The sort of frustration of a lack of imagination, that the only option is violence, or the only option is, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and thank you for speaking to that. I know it's a large leading question to start, and as you said, that no single conversation is going to be able to encapsulate every layer of complexity and nuance, but I would imagine that there's similar levels of frustration with your fellow to use a more Christian term, your fellow believers, the other people in your community, as to what is happening within parts of American Christianity and global Christianity, when there's this type of nationalism, and Zionism is a component of that. How does it is is there like a is there just completely messy
Is
within
you mean
within your communities, or is it or is there like a pretty stark divide between Zionist and anti-Zionist, or I don't even know if those are the proper terms anymore.
there's no, it's not, I mean, it's not stark. There is, listen, there are people who are, so first of all, I want to say, because I think this is something that gets lost a lot in the discourse. Zionist and anti-Zionist are like these massive Rorschach test words. Like,
Mhm.
what do people will use the words and think things that other people like, what do you think of when you say these words, and what do I think of when I say these words are not necessarily right. Do you when you say anti-Zionist, do you think everybody who's currently in the land is free and liberated and collective future, or do you think push all the Jews into the sea, right? When you say Zionist, do you think um, you know, everybody else gets a homeland, and how come we don't? And my ancestors were getting massacred by Ukrainians and in the pogroms, and what, you wanted me to just get holocausted, trauma, right? um I don't want to get pushed into the sea. And yes, I want Palestinians to have human rights. And yes, we want to figure this out. And yes, I believe in a collective future. And yes, I want to sit down and find a solution. Or do I mean, um, shove, like Nakba 2.0, right? What am I thinking? I and or a lot of other things in the middle. Like, there are a lot of, like, I know people who live in Israel who have been fighting occupation their whole, like, their entire have made their entire careers fighting for Palestinian lives, freedom, futures, and might identify as Zionists. Like, what, but like, and have been doing the work in a way that a lot of these internet crusaders, could never. What is a name?
Mhm. Mhm.
And I think there are a lot of other people. More and more, you're seeing discourse in the Jewish community, and this is the important part, where people are like, these words are not useful anymore
Mhm.
because they are so polarizing, and you say a word and I don't know what you mean. And when you say this, do you mean we're talking about, like, what political future do you mean when you say this word? Like, are
Yeah.
we talking to, two state solution? Are we talking one state solution? Are we talking the Confederacy? Are we talking, like, there are all sorts of, there are a million people who have been working very seriously on, like, concretely, guys, what are we going to look like? Like, let's, God willing, there is a future, God willing, like real reparations, right? There's got to be something meaningful between here and there, right? Assuming. Then what? Um, and so people are starting to say, like, just like, what if we just find new words?
Yeah.
Because these words don't serve us anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, I want to build on that a little bit. You sort of dialed in about like, do you see there a distinct difference between online discourse and and its its nature versus some of the more, I don't know, substant I don't know whether to say substantive or like, but for instance, like if you're gonna have a take on Threads or Blue Sky or wherever else versus someone who either is who's meeting other people in person or at a conference or whatever, and people might be um, be very deliberate about their language. I mean, your work is called Life as a Sacred Text. You think a lot about language,
Yeah.
and I do as well. Like, and one of the and it does seem that that online it is so captured by sort of by both like bots as well as right wing efforts to like bankrupt a term or to like they essentially do this sort of flood the zone thing, but with linguistics a lot of the time.
Yep.
I mean, um, so this is a long sort of preamble, I suppose, but um, do you see a distinct difference between the way these terms are used and circulated online versus when you meet with people in smaller spaces or
The
in
actual real
person?
world. Yes.
Yeah,
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 and it's important because listen, I as somebody who has been uncomfortably capital V capital O very online at various points in my life.
hmm,
The algorithm rewards extreme positions,
yeah,
right, and strong takes and big words and all of that stuff, right? And the sort of harder you go, the more the algorithm's going to push you out, and the more people you're going to attract people who have binary thinking, and so the more you're going to get the people who are giving you flags and not what if human rights, safety, and dignity, right?
right.
And like as though human lives are sports teams, um like guys. And like I'm sorry, I know personally and have had I and have met know personally, have friendships, acquaintances, whatever, like various levels, some of the people who have been doing this work in like the most important kind of core pieces of this work for decades. And uh,
Right.
those,
Yeah.
those
The
like
frustration.
yeah, it doesn't, like, those people do not speak in slogans, right? Those people talk about what it means when this particular village is blockaded in this way, right?
Yeah.
What are the implications on these human beings when this policy is passed? What are, if this particular house is allowed to be demolished by the army, these are the implications for life and rights, right? It's fucking specific
Yeah. Yeah.
because that's what this is about. It's about people, it's about lives. In this prison, these things are happening. This is a violation of the following laws and the following statutes,
Mhm.
right? It's not about buzzwords. And
Right.
it's blah, screw your buzzwords. Talk about what's going on. And
Yeah.
if you're not able to intelligently talk about what's going on, you have no right to the buzzwords. And if
Mhm.
you don't understand the history, if you don't understand the context, if you learned your history and your context of this, you know, more than 100-year, 150 millennia long conflagration from a couple of TikToks, like, fuck you, get into your lane, go read some books. I actually, Life is a Sacred Text has a bookstore where I keep a lot of lists of book recommendations and stuff. And I have a whole list of books on Israel Palestine that are great primers, great like intros to actually understanding what's going on, written by, largely Palestinians, also some Israelis who know what they're doing and, are right. Like people who actually know, like, understand the history
Mhm.
and the context. Go
Mhm.
learn.
Yeah. Yeah, that might just be the title of this episode.
Go
Go
and
learn.
learn. So you say in the
And
Talmud all the time.
and as you mentioned TikTok, and like and that is definitely a major part of the information environment. That I mean, I definitely consume those sorts of things now. I'm not I a lot most people are probably not exceptions to this.
No. I
They
mean, me
incorporate
too.
it.
I just don't speak
Right.
on the things I learn about, you know? It's like,
Right. Right. And to your point, there are people, I mean, there are so many people like I have former coworkers when I was in um advocacy work who, were such subject matter experts. They don't have an online presence. I mean, if they had an online presence, it'd probably endanger their real work.
exactly.
You know, and so they don't have an online presence. They're not sharing their expertise with the world because that's not their role.
Right.
But there are those people that have those insights, um the public may not know them, but that doesn't mean the public still deserves knowledgeable responses to these types of things.
Right.
But you mentioned TikTok, and obviously with so much information coming out from the Epstein Files, sometimes in these major dumps like we saw uh, in January, and there are some of the things that are in those files that seem so outlandish but happened, but then they also get very close to sort of conspiracy. And I do promise both you and the listener and viewer that we are going to shift away from some of these heavier things in the second half of this conversation. However, um, you have obviously one risk of all this coming out is it can lead to anti-Semitism. And you actually have a post on your site that we'll link in the show notes called the Anti-Semitism Post. And I'll quote a little bit from that. You say there's room for challenging conversation and debate around Israel. Criticism of Israel and anti-Zionism are not inherently anti-Semitic. Discussion of the genocide in Gaza and the apartheid under which Palestinians have lived for decades is not anti-Semitic. It's also important to remember that just as we thoughtfully, you say later, it's also important to remember that just as we thoughtfully separate the actions of the American government and systems from the belief of all Americans, that so too do we not implicate the individual Israelis in the actions of their government, especially given that support for Bibi is at like 15%. So that's great. Uh, that's great context, and the entire post is wonderful, and we'll list it in the show notes. But again, with these sort of online conversations and everything that is occurring on the global stage and has embroiled the United States and Israel's government and expanded war in the region, what sort of sensitivity, what things should my audience be aware of with regards to being aware of possible anti-Semitism and how it interacts with these legitimate world events?
So anti-Semitism has a very long history.
Mhm.
Let me see if I can do this in a couple of sentences. The form that exists today in the United States of America 2026 began when Rome, you know, those guys who crucified Jesus Christ, those guys, converted to Christianity and then had a problem because, oh, wait, we killed this guy, but now we're Christians, so who's going to be the bad guy in the story? Don't blame us. Blame the Jews. Blame the Jews, not the guys in power. Great. That's how the Roman Empire started that. And you start to see this trope pick up a lot of steam in medieval Europe. Super convenient. Anytime there's plague, economic downfall, whatever, all these expulsions of Jews, blame the Jews, not me. And the Post gets into all of the how it got from here to there. I don't need to go into the step by step. But the bottom line is that, as April Rosenblum articulated perfectly, unlike pretty much every other oppression that I can think of, anti-Semitism almost functions better when Jews are doing well, at least functions as well when Jews are doing okay in society. Sometimes we are doing poorly over history, right? In the shtetl, in the whenever. But it functions just fine when we're doing great economically or socially or whatever. Because this story, blame the Jews, it's the Jews' fault, not the czar. It's the Jews' fault, not the king. It's the Jews' fault, not Trump. It's the Jews' fault, not right? It's the Jews' fault, not the Americans who are making sure that this war on Gaza is right. Like, obviously, in the case of Israel, like, there's also Israel is making choices, but a lot of this stuff would not have been prolonged as much as it had been if other empires had not, chosen to have their backs, and people refused to look at the larger structural stuff. But this is, which is not to abdicate Israel's role in this. But with so many of the conspiracy theories running around, blame the Jews, not me. Blame the Jews, and watch how Trump deploys this constantly. Blame the Jews, not the guys in power, becomes the name of the game. And so you have to watch who's blaming, who's doing the blaming, where are the Jews, and who's being asked to do the blaming, where is power, right? And who's getting mad about what. And you always got to do the power analysis, because there's also the thing, the anti-Semitism on the right, anti-Semitism on the left, anti-Semitism by people who have cultural power in our culture versus anti-Semitism by people who have less cultural power in our culture. It's not okay. And they perpetuate it, and synagogues are getting burned, and people are getting shot. And you just and we have to continue to do power analysis and understand who's deploying what for what ends why. That's all. None of it's okay. Good people are being harmed. We need to stop that. And power matters. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So much of it seems that so much of our, I don't know, our information, just our media ecosystems are sometimes designed for us to not consider who has actual power. It's just about who's the either the warm body in front of you or even just an avatar online that you can lash out at, and that's not helpful for anyone.
No, and it's deliberate. The system works by design.
My dog won't stop yipping, so I'm gonna let him in. All right, 1 second, please.
Okay.
Apologies, I don't know if you could hear him in the background, or not, but he was sort of demanding attention.
Peppers.
Apologies for that. Um, let's shift towards some of the things that you've been working on over the last several years, which is this online publication I have called "Life is a Sacred Text." And tell me about the title first, because I think it's very evocative, and I really like the framing of it. So, what inspired you to choose that as the title for your publication?
You know, it just kind of came to me. The work itself integrates ancient texts, largely biblical, but also I'm increasingly playing with other stuff from the Jewish tradition. I have always and increasingly more playing with, Talmudic and Hasidic and Kabbalah and whatever wants to come in and play. Maimonides is um, my dead medieval boyfriend that I yell at a lot.
Which was the basis for your prior book. I was
Yes.
working through.
It's like it's really I am that gift from Brokeback Mountain. Like I can't quit you. Like I don't know what it is. But though we have words a lot. And I I think that the point of our relationship to these books, and I know that a lot of y'all who are listening have, I imagine that many of you have had very painful relationships to these books in the past. And I honor that. And there's a lot of painful stuff in there, and they have been used in so many harmful ways. And I think there's also the potential to use all of these things, including the shitty stuff. Okay, I'm not going to pretend that the Hebrew Bible is a book of joy and light with no painful stuff in there. Like, I'm a queer feminist. Like, come on. I've read it. But if we read intentionally, thoughtfully, with all of the lenses of history and bringing all of our full selves, they can illuminate, they can be lenses that help illuminate our world now and can help us. I mean, our culture today is completely toxic in so many ways, and can help refract and help us be, and sort of an echo chamber to help us see then and now in new ways. And I want us to be able to read our own lives with the same care and honor, and Jewishly, in the way of being able to read layers and layers and see ourselves. In the Jewish world, we don't read one verse and be like, oh, that's what it means. It's like, we have a verse on the page, and Rashi says this, and Sforno says this, and Maimonides says this, and Nachmanides says this, and they're all like, literally, we lay it out so that we have all of these dead guys, of course, like yelling at each other on the page about what's going on. Like our lot, like we hold all of that, and we can honor our lives and every moment that happens in that same way with that multiplicity. and the beauty, and keep coming back to it, and the multi-layered and the multi-vocality of it, in a way that's really beautiful. So I think it's kind of the both and, like both our relationship to the ancient stuff and our own experience of now, using the techniques of sacred text.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, and um, it's valuable to it's valuable to see that people in different eras struggled with the same sort of thing that we do.
Yes.
You know, like I think so much as we so much has so we we learn about our neighbors and we learn about the world so much that like that does feel unique and different, but they still face this similar ethical struggles. And it's I learned about that. I forget. I wish I could cite or attribute where I learned this, but someone did say that Talmudic texts look more like what hypertext is now, where you just have the original text and then the commentary and then the commentary on the commentary, and it actually is very much like a similar to how discourse still works, where you talk. There's an inciting, there's a catalyst for conversation, or there's the original text or comment, and then comments upon comments, which is fascinating. And then you're sort of bringing that into an inherently digital space as well,
It's totally, yeah. There's a
which is
book called
cool.
The Internet and the Talmud, like in like the early mid 90s, like we've been and now if you go to Sefaria, sefaria.org, you'll be able to play with text in the same, it's like it's set up so
That's neat.
perfectly. Yeah.
You have a new series that is on the prophetic era. What um, what are you investigating in that series?
I mean, talk about people who have had the same problems that we have now. It's, a bunch of guys running around looking at their society being like, what are you doing? Why are you treating people like this? Are you kidding me? know, it just, it just feels like this is the moment to look to people who are, running around their own time and place going, remember morals? Remember those? You know, like, what can we learn from the people who, um, however they were treated at their own time and place, um, literally their whole thing was trying to remind their communities that compassion and care for the folks who are socially marginalized, including the non-citizen, and including those who were impoverished and struggling to eat, is like actually the whole point of why we're here. And I think a close read of their voices can help us. I'm hoping help us find our way now, because we're a little lost.
Yeah,
we
yeah.
need some.
There's
We
not
need we
there's
need
not
more
much
tools. Yeah.
there's not much moral leadership happening within our society for sure. And on that note, you did write recently about the idea of moral injury. We'll link that piece in the show notes. Can you talk about that concept and how that plays out sort of in our individual lives as well as as groups? I oftentimes people like in my audience often struggle because we were part of a group and now we're not part of a group.
Yeah. I mean,
That has its own form of injury, but
yep.
it also is there's more to it than that. So
Yes.
I'd love to hear you talk about that concept and why it's important to have in mind when we're considering our feelings and our actions.
Yeah. I mean, exactly. I mean, it's so relatable for anybody who's experienced institutional betrayal, which is, I imagine, a lot of y'all listening, and I'm sending you love and compassion and solidarity. So, moral injury is the experience of having one's moral compass violated, basically. And whether that's because you were forced to do something that felt wrong, whether you witnessed something that felt wrong, whether you tried to stop something and were unable to, whether you were just a bystander, right? Like, it's any of those kinds of things. And this concept began when people talked to veterans who were coming back from being in war situations, and they were being asked by their ranking officers, or when you saw your leaders or other trusted figures do things that you knew were wrong, right? And they're reporting, like, I was asked to do this thing and I knew it wasn't right, but I had to, or I saw these things, or I witnessed, or I couldn't stop. And they started to realize how many different types of of us, of people, have experienced this soul wound in different ways. And it's still very much an emerging field. And the level of injury or trauma, I think, depends on what's happened. Another place where it comes up a lot is healthcare, right? Imagine somebody who was, during the COVID pandemic being forced to make decisions about who's getting care or who's not, right? Nobody should ever have to be like, what the fuck, right? But I think right now, everybody in our society, anyone paying attention, is experiencing deep collective moral injury. But any of us, and I include myself in this, who have experienced institutional betrayal, that experience of having an institution of trust, a place that you thought you were safe, thought you were protected, thought people had your back, and it turns out it was not so safe, not so trusted, not where you thought you were actually going to be cared for, right? And having that kind of ripped apart, that's a deep experience of moral betrayal, and that's a deep sort of injury, and it's real. So I want to validate anybody who's been feeling that. Should I talk about a little bit about what they figured out about how to address it? Would that be helpful?
Sure. Yeah, I think that'd be great. If there's if there's any aspects of just personal recovery, because I do think that a lot of these, like, addressing institutional harm or injury or betrayal, that's much harder to do, and I mean, it requires like capital and resources that a lot of people don't have. But for someone who might be listening to this for their own personal benefit, if you do have any insights into either practices or even things for them to think through whether they have been injured, because sometimes these things can happen and we're not conscious of it until we have language like this
Right.
to articulate.
Yeah. So, I mean, the first thing is really articulating the harm, right? And whether that's with a trusted somebody who gets it, or trusted therapist, right? Talk about it with other people. And like, mental health professionals are a great anybody trained professional, somebody who's gone through this, or somebody who's gone through the same thing, right? Just somebody who can be with you and validate your experience and say, yes, this is real, and be witnessed. It's really important. The work of repentance and repair. And, look, in an ideal world, the people who hurt you actually show up and do the work and acknowledge that they did wrong. And in most of our lives, that's not something we're going to get. But self-compassion is huge. Even if you don't get amends, you can still do repair work, right? And the forgiving or choosing not to, but thinking about what your relationship to forgiveness, and you're not obligated to forgive your abusers. I talk about a lot about this in my book. But working on healing work is part of it. Rebuilding your own values and integrity, and figuring out how to live your own values, including helping other people, helps a lot. And being in a healthy community helps a lot. And maybe trauma therapy.
Mhm. Yeah, those are all great. Thank you for sharing that. And we'll be sure to link all the things we're talking about in the show notes so that you can reference this after you listen to this conversation. Um, and one of the things that I admire about how you frame your work is that you do acknowledge you do acknowledge that people have different they have different beliefs, and different no and different.
This is shocking. I know.
No, I know, but I think
The bar is pretty low.
me
I
showing
know.
this is me showing my own history here.
I know.
When you come from from a place like evangelicalism, where if you don't toe the party line, then you're out of you're out of step.
I know.
Um,
It is also unfortunately in my universe, it is also definitely not a given. And as a
right,
former atheist, it's something it's important to me. And
right.
yeah,
This is one of those threads that keeps grabbing my attention, and this is something that I think we just continually have to focus on a little bit. And we is just like the collective we, I guess, those of us in these in these spheres. But what I admire is the way in which you do articulate, and you say, like, whether you're secular or spiritual, or whether you whatever your belief is, whether that is articulated as in a Jewish community or practice, or you speak to all those people sort of where they are, and I appreciate that you have a level of open-endedness about that. And I'm curious what you think are some things that people, whether they're Christians or formerly Christians, or in those weird liminal places, because I mean, people's beliefs change all the time. But what do you consider some of the most important aspects of being able to work across theological types of beliefs, especially when it comes to, doing the substantive work that's not going to be solved in a single conversation like this. It's not going to be solved in a blue sky thread. It's gonna be lifetime work, generational work. what what sort of posture do you take to help you in that work?
so I mean, it's so not rocket science, and it is, I think, the kind of thing that those of us who have had any kind of journey, who have gone from being in one place, from one place to another. And, I grew up kind of secular, Jewish, American, suburban, assimilated, and got interested in Judaism and spirituality in my 20s, and my relationship to Judaism has grown and changed and shifted a lot in the 30 years since. I'm no spring chicken, but even when I got religion, so to speak, the part where I had ever been a grumpy atheist as opposed to a grumpy Jew, I guess, was always with me. And I think those of us who have journeyed from being one thing to another, I think can hold best this understanding that not everybody thinks the same thing. It's not it is literally not rocket science, and I think people who have never gone on that journey sometimes struggle to remember that. And it's literally the humility to remember that just because you think something doesn't mean that everybody else does or should, and and that what's right for you is not necessarily right for everybody else, and the curiosity to want to understand somebody else's beliefs or experience. I will admittedly, it's this is easy for me spiritually, and there are other ways that I struggle with it. Politically, I have very, very strong opinions, and they're all correct.
Naturally.
Obviously, and until I change my mind, in which case, until I learn and grow, in which case my next opinion is correct. But yeah, I mean, it's and then so it's, what is it? Everything you think we're allowed to be subjective. Other people are allowed to have their own opinions, curiosity, and then the last thing is understanding your lane, which is something that took me a little longer to learn. And it's just like, what is yours to speak on, and where do you need to shut up? And what is like not mine to speak on and not appropriate for me to say. And I still screw up on this plenty, and I sometimes get appropriately smacked on for it, and that's fine. But yeah, remembering that not every topic is for me.
Yeah. Well, those are wise words, and it's something that I think that we all need reminded of sometimes. I am so glad that we solved all problems in this conversation. That this will be no, in all earnestness. Thank you for joining me today, and for going over and tackling some large issues in a small amount of time. I the website is lifeisasacredtext.com. Is there anything else you want to mention here at the end?
I just grateful for you and everything you're doing.
Thank you.
Really, really important work. Yeah.
Thank you. Well, Rabbi Danya Ruttenberg, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.